Hi, my name's Glenn, founder of the Flow agency here in the UK, and today this is the first video in a short mini-series covering the build of totnesdelivers.co.uk. Specifically, it's a website built in Webflow, but there are other moving parts behind the scenes which I want to go into. And in this first video, we're going to be looking at how we keep the data synchronized between an Airtable backend solution, which we use as our CRM, and obviously Webflow on the front end and collections behind the website. In the middle of all of that, we have Integromat as our automation layer, and there are various integrations on the website which we'll look at in a future video. So first off then, we are living in the era of COVID-19 where businesses are struggling to exist. They're having to close their doors, and this website is a means to help advertise those businesses that are still delivering to people's homes in our community, and the community is a town called Totnes. The people at home obviously still need to eat, still need to order things, and therefore this is meant to be helping both the people at home and businesses, and just keep the community thriving while we are in this strange form of isolation. So looking at the homepage, you'll see that there is a long list, about 45 at the moment, businesses in the area here who are still operating, and we're adding to this every day. It's a very basic listing design whereby you can actually hover over particular businesses and decide to click through and find out more about them, but the primary information that people need is obviously the contact information here. So some of this information is entered by the businesses when they sign up, and we're going to have a look at that form in a minute, and some of that information is entered behind the scenes in Airtable, and it all blends together into the Webflow solution, and we'll be looking at that in the collections. So the first thing I'd really like to do is actually have a look at the Register Your Business form, and this is where it all starts really. It's a regular Webflow form with fields, and the two types of fields that I really want to look at in this video today are the single reference fields, like choosing a particular category for this business listing that we're adding, and being able to do a multiple select on the way that businesses can prepare those orders and the way the customer can receive those orders. So this is those two types of fields are the single ref field in Webflow and the multi-ref field in Webflow, and we're going to look at how we get the data synchronized between the two platforms, Airtable and Webflow. And looking behind the scenes, you'll see in Airtable that there is a table called Businesses, and this is where we're capturing all of that data. We'll look at the other tables that are an important part of this solution in a minute. We're going to be using Lamaro Bakery as our example today, so we'll keep focusing around that. And you can see that this has all of the information that the business has filled in already, including email address, telephone number, the primary business category, the best way to contact them to place an order, and as you'll see here, ways to receive orders. This is the checkboxes on the form that you just saw. They can actually have multiple ways to deliver on those orders to the customer. So that's an important part of what we'll look at today. And then tags is another one where you can have multiple references there to other records. Now, when I say other records, what I mean is in Airtable, you can relate records together. So where we have a primary category of bakery, that is actually being referenced through from, if I actually just select that one, you can see that this little white arrow is pointing to where that record is being referenced, which is actually in the categories table over here. So if I were to go to ways to receive orders, you will see that you've got multiple businesses attached to a particular way to receive orders, but back over here, if I just scroll across Lamaro Bakery, you can see that again, there's the white line pointing to that table, ways to receive orders. So you can see that there are multiple entries in there, one to pick up in store and one for home delivery. Now the power of this really is in what we want to do is get the relations that are created in Airtable to be the same as the relations created in Webflow. So these two systems are in sync in their entirety. What that means is that the list of categories that we have here and the list of the ways to receive orders that we have here, we want to get those across into Webflow and have that working one-to-one, so they're totally in sync together. So looking at our collections in Webflow, you can now see that there is a categories collection, and there is a ways to receive orders collection. And what we're looking to do, as I say, is make sure that these items are the same for all intents and purposes between the two systems. How do we keep that in sync? Well, some of you will know the Webflow item ID is essential for this kind of work. So just looking at the column here that I've enabled, you can see that each category has a unique item ID here, like a record ID. So what we want to do is make sure that we can bring that over into Airtable, and we can go to categories, and we can actually then store that Webflow item ID in Airtable. And that means that anytime we want to update something, that we know where to go and what record to look for in Webflow. And you'll see how that comes into play in a minute with the automation. So I do that across the board. I do it with the ways to receive orders. I do it with the ways to place orders. I do it with the tags, and we'll look at that in a while, or maybe in a future video. And I even do it for the businesses. So I really want to make sure that all of the IDs, the unique IDs that we have for the records in Airtable, are mapped over to Webflow. So that's the most important thing to remember. So in Airtable, we can see that the primary category, for example, is bakery. And this is a standard lookup field. It's a standard sort of relation field in Airtable, but we don't want to use this text as a reference. We want to use its unique Webflow item ID when we want to synchronize things. So you can see that we have a lookup field here, which actually brings through the Webflow item ID from the category table and brings it into the businesses table. And that's important because we're going to actually make use of that when we automate the businesses data over to Webflow. And over in Webflow, what we're looking to achieve here is that the primary business category is set when the data is synchronized across. So we don't have to select it in here, we just have it set in the Airtable that's coming via the form, and that's synchronized over into Webflow. So that's, as you can see here, a single select. It's a single ref field, and it's referring to the categories collection that we have over here. So you can see that it's got bakery there. So that's the idea that we're looking to achieve. And the bit in the middle that's important in all of this is the one that we use, which is Integromat. And specifically, we have a set of scenarios around this project that run, but the one that we're going to look at first is the Airtable to Webflow categories data synchronizer. Okay, so what this scenario is doing is it's looking for any records in the categories table in Airtable and to see whether they have been added or changed. If they are new, we will see that there is a path up here that Integromat will follow, and it knows to follow it because it has a condition, a filter to say if there is no Webflow item ID in the Airtable, it does not exist, then it must be new, and that's a fair assumption to make. So if it does that, it follows this path and creates the Webflow category in the collection. If the Webflow item ID does exist, then it knows that it needs to update that item in Webflow. So you'll see that we're not managing the records in Webflow, we're always managing them in Airtable. We're using that as our single source of truth. Now, one of the most important parts about this is once it's created the item in Webflow in the collection, we need to then update the original record in Airtable, the source of the data, and we need to update that ID with the new Webflow item ID that's just been created. This is the crucial bit because that then means that we're bringing back this ID into the categories table, and we can use it within the businesses table. So that's what we're looking to achieve here. Now this is relatively straightforward, and people do this in different ways all the time. We're doing it as we're creating the categories, so that we immediately know in Airtable that we have the data that we need. So the key here is that this ID, that is the Webflow item ID, is then passed over via Integromat to Webflow when the business is updated. So I guess you could think of this as Webflow only really being interested in these references and these IDs. It doesn't really care what bakery is, it's only interested in that particular reference there. So when we do a synchronization of a business over to Webflow, and we'll have a look at that. Let's just say that we are creating a new approved business. So I have a task here which handles that, which is the Airtable to Webflow approved business creator. It will go ahead and create that item in Webflow, and we'll just load this up. And there are lots of things going on here, but the only one I really want to look at is this one, which is the fact that the business, the primary business category, it's not going to pass through that, or try to pass through the bakery label, if you like. What we need is that reference, that lookup, and the lookup is, as it says here in the column, the ID from the category table. So that's how that works. It's quite straightforward, but the really amazing thing about Integromat is that when you pass through values like this, pass through the ID values of this, you don't need to do anything special. You don't need to put single quotes, double quotes, anything like that. It just knows to pass through that ID as a reference, and then once you get to Webflow and you're in that particular business, and we're looking at, let's see, where we're, Lamaro Bakery, then you'll see that it knows to select bakery from the table, even though it's using the number behind the scenes. So that's the way that works. Now, some of you are wondering, what happens with the drop down on the Register a Business form? Because you need to be able to have the same categories shown in that drop down as the ones that you're trying to match them against in Airtable. So if we didn't do that, or we were updating this list here and we were trying to keep the same list up to date in Webflow, it becomes a mess. So as I say, if Airtable's the single source of truth and it is where we update our categories, once we get those synchronized over into Webflow via Integromat, we then need to be able to fill those options in our drop-down. Now, if you look at the primary business category drop-down in Webflow, you'll see that actually we just have the standard select one choice there, which is the default that Webflow puts in. What we need to do is be able to fill that in when you actually view this page, and you can see here we've filled in all the categories as options to select so that the user can actually select the option. What we have opted for in this project is using the same value for display as the value that's sent behind the scenes, and that's just worth bearing in mind as we just move on from this. But how that happens in Webflow, how we get that drop down dynamically building, if you like, is we make use of a hidden collection list, and this is the list of all the categories, and this was actually taken from, slightly adapted from an excellent video tutorial that Nelson did, I think even a few months ago. But this one's a really interesting way of doing it, whereby you have your standard list of categories with a sort order even, and whatever you need there, and actually you then on the page itself you can actually show what that pairing would be, i.e. the option display value and the actual value, so you can use a different value if you want to, and you just hide it, so you just don't need to actually see that anywhere. It's just there behind the scenes and we keep that hidden. In order to then actually get the drop down to actually fill in, we then need to make use of that collection that we have hidden there and get it into the select box, which takes a little bit of code. The actual little bit of code is in the actual page settings themselves, where you can have a look here in the script that it's actually doing a little bit of JavaScript, which is basically just saying in that hidden collection, I want to grab the display value and the actual value. Happens to be the same in this case, but as I say, could be different in future use cases. And in the dynamic drop-down, I want to append each of those pairings as my option values. So it's building up the option values in that drop-down, and once it gets to the end of the collection, it finishes. That's the end of the at the end of the select, we actually have two dynamic drop downs on this page, so you can see that it's doing it for the ways to place an order drop down as well. So quite simple. If anybody needs help with that or wants me to send them that code, just let me know. You'll find me on Twitter, the Flow Agency, or elsewhere on MakerPad, for example. But the key to it is that that's actually quite a simple JavaScript to achieve a pretty powerful goal here. So I could highly recommend this approach. So this means that when the business selects art and stationery from that drop down, behind the scenes we're going to be sending the value of art and stationery through the form. And what we've actually got is a Webflow to Airtable new business creator task here, which will do something a bit clever. What it will do is it will take that text value, and let's just scroll down to where we've got primary business category. It'll take that text value of art and stationery, and it will say, well, look, I'm expecting IDs, but I don't have any IDs, but I do have the name. So if I toggle this little map switch here, and then I ensure down at the bottom that I have smart links ticked, what Integromat will do in combination with Airtable is it will say, okay, so I'm trying to put in a category of art and stationery, whatever it may be, but actually I know that behind the scenes that's this particular record, and I know which one you're talking about. And the only reason that we managed to be able to achieve that is because we originally synced over the data from Airtable to Webflow, and now that selection in the drop down is sending that same ID back again, or the same thing back again, to match up against in our Airtable. So that's why you can see why we try to have a single source of truth and not try and maintain two separate lists of data all the time. So I'm going to wrap this up here because this video's gone on a little bit long already, but what I'm going to cover in the next video is then the multi-ref field aspect of Webflow and Airtable together, and you'll see that as an example here with the checkboxes as we looked at earlier. If I was to click on Pickup in Store, if you can see down below here, we have a hidden field, and as I click on that checkbox, you can see that Pickup in Store is actually set as a value for that checkbox, and if you untick it, it clears the value. This is the key to that part of the solution working, and I'll cover that in the next video. So hopefully you found the single ref and some of the concepts between Airtable, Integromat, Webflow and back again useful. If you're interested and want to continue on this mini series, then see you in video 2. Thanks a lot.